Welcome to the Why Not podcast with me, Chrissy Hawkins. In a world where everybody asks you why, I'm here to ask why not. So sit back and relax or walk and listen and join me on this journey as we try to answer this never-ending question: what makes people say, why not? Hi guys, welcome back to Why Not. So today I am joined by Kendall Platt, who is the mindful gardening coach. So firstly, I want to welcome you to the podcast, Kendall. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And just so everyone can know, can you explain a little bit about who you are, what you do, where the mindful gardening coaching comes from?
Sure. So I'm Kendall Platt, as you said, and I help women to take time out of their busy lives to quieten their minds whilst creating a garden that sets their heart on fire. So I, for as long as I can remember, have had a very busy mind. And actually, last year was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 36.
Yay.
So I just presumed that, everyone's minds were as busy as mine was, but it turns out actually not. But unbeknownst to me, I was completely unaware that I had ADHD, didn't even really know that it was a thing. I actually started gardening about 10 years ago when I moved into the house that I live in now. And I only really started gardening because I had a garden and it needed doing. So I just added it to my list of stuff that, my to-do list, and started to get out there, and didn't have a clue what I was doing, if I'm completely honest. But what I quite quickly realized was that while I was out there, my mind was quiet for the first time probably ever in my life. And that was very, very attractive to me. So the more that I was out there, the quieter my mind was, the more headspace I had to kind of, just not feel like a constant like whirring of my mind going on. And it really helped me. I've always struggled with anxiety. So it really helped me to kind of control my anxiety, to feel less anxious, to feel less stressed, to feel less overwhelmed. And it wasn't until I had my first daughter that I thought to myself, I really, at the time I was working in the forensics industry. So I was a forensic scientist for many years. And I was like, I really don't want to go back into that industry after I had my first daughter. I was like, it's not very good for my mental health, seeing, the horrible things that people do to each other every day. I really feel passionately that gardening and taking time for yourself in the garden is so important, especially for women, because I think we still take on a lot of the mental load, certainly in partnerships and families. And it had been so transformative and so powerful for me in reducing my stress levels. I actually used it before I had my kids. I burnt out because I just used to work all the time. And I was like, I need to get this out there to more women. So I was like, sod it, I'm gonna start my own business. Thought it would be like super simple. And obviously, as you I'm sure are aware, it brings up a whole load of other stuff, right? So I started at Christmas time, actually, because when I was at university, I studied biology, but I worked as a florist on the weekends on a flower stall. Yeah, so I went to uni in Bath, and in Bath at the time they had this beautiful, like, imagine like an old Covent Garden style barrow, like the wooden barrow that we used to wheel out every morning, and then we'd set up the flower stall, and it was beautiful. It's like real, I mean, how I didn't know I was ADHD. It was like so visually pleasing, like all these bright colors in like a rainbow. And I was just instantly drawn to it, and I literally just went over to them and went, can I have a job? And they were like, do you have any experience? I was like, no, but I think I'm quite creative. Like, I give it a go. They were like, oh, okay, well, come tomorrow and like come for a trial. So I went for a trial and got on really well, really enjoyed it. Actually, who knew, had some floristry skills just buried in my mind somewhere. And yeah, I worked there like every Saturday and Sunday for like the entirety of my university degree. And actually now like my degree obviously was pretty intense, like studying sciences. I, you know, now when I look back at it, I'm like, obviously I needed that creative outlook, like that outlet. So that was really like my switch off time, I guess, my time where I could just like create with my hands, not be too much up in my own head about it.
Your
And you know,
gateway to gardening. You started with the florist. Gateway.
exactly, yeah. So I started that first winter. I was like, right, I'm going to do some mindful wreath making courses, you know, because everyone likes making a Christmas wreath. Why not? I know how to do it. I've made hundreds of them in my lifetime. But I really wanted to bring in that kind of mindfulness element. So really engaging the senses. And I really wanted to create like a real experience for the people that came, like 2 hours for them, switch off, to put themselves first for a couple of hours, and to create something that, you know, maybe when they arrived, they were thinking, Jesus, can I even do this? Like, I'm not sure I'm very good. I'm not sure I'm very creative. And still to this day, when people come, they say the same thing. Oh, I've never done this before. I'm worried I'm not going to be very good. And then at the end, guaranteed, they're so proud of what they've created. And they've had that couple of hours to kind of just take a bit of a break out of life and quiet their mind. So
What is it
that's
like
what
though to see that transition when they do those courses?
oh, it's like the most amazing feeling, because even though I knew obviously I did it for myself, because that's why I started the business, but the fact that I, you know, that I've then given them that time for them and seen that transformation, and potentially, without wanting to use a really cringy gardening like analogy, I'm going to, but like planted that seed of like, oh, when I take a couple of hours for myself, I feel really fucking good afterwards. Perhaps I need to do a little bit more of this. How can I do that? I could do that going to the gym more often. I could do that creating with flowers more often. I could do that in my getting in my garden regularly, you know, and it's just about kind of that like little intro and just helping them to realize. And I make a real point of this, whether it's in my workshops or whether it's in the mindful gardening activities I share on my Substack. You know, I say to people before they start, how are you feeling? Like 1 to 10, how are you feeling? 10 is like excellent. 1 is bit anxious, bit stressed, like overwhelmed. And then I get them to kind of rate themselves basically at the start of the workshop. Then we obviously do the activity, whether that is seed sowing, you know, a retreat
Mhm.
I'm hosting, or the wreath making. And then at the end I get them to check in, and it's really, they always obviously feel better afterwards. But I think so often it's easy, isn't it, to just go through life doing everything, doing, and not stopping and noticing how you're actually feeling. You know, I was very guilty of that for many years, because actually I knew that if I stopped and felt, I probably wouldn't have felt very great about everything, which I think is probably why I overworked so badly and why I ended up in burnout. I think, you know, certainly our generation are not that used to feeling their feelings. In fact, I don't know about your upbringing, but for me, I wasn't encouraged. In fact, I was actively discouraged from showing my emotions. And as an
I feel like that's really normal, isn't it? For like Irish and British people, like it's like
mm,
you don't do emotion, you just get on with it. Like that's what you're
yeah,
supposed to do.
yeah, or maybe the only emotion you might do, because you can't bloom and control it because you've been shoving it down for so long, is anger, and then you get punished for it. So
Hmm.
like, you know, you can't win. And I realized that like that's what I was doing. I was shoving everything down so I didn't have to deal with it. And then it came out in some sort of spectacular burnout where I basically couldn't stop crying, couldn't sleep, was just like sweating constantly, was in a real state. And it was like a real realization of like, well, no wonder, like my body cannot contain all this emotion. You know, like I said earlier, I have ADHD. I'm a very emotional person. I'm very sensitive, but I was never allowed to be that sensitive little girl or woman. You know, it was always like, oh, stop being dramatic, stop being oversensitive, stop crying, stop doing that, stop being yourself. And
Yeah.
actually, you can't bury that forever, because it will come out in some way, whether that is in an addiction to work, to drugs, to alcohol, to food. Like, you know, you just need to look at our society, and everyone has something that they use in order to moderate their emotions.
Even exercise comes up in that. Like there's many times that I've like highlighted as a case of, because people glorify people being thin.
Mm,
Um, if you look at any time I've been ridiculously skinny, it means I'm really stressed. It's
yeah,
not that it's not a good thing.
yeah, exactly. And I think there are so many other healthy coping mechanisms out there, whether that is exercising for your brain rather than to get skinny or whatever, or whether that is getting in your garden. There are other avenues to choose, but it's up to us to present them to people in a way that is like doable, doesn't seem overwhelming, doesn't feel like it adds to the mental load, because I think women are busy. We've got a lot on our plates, and to add another, it feels quite onerous sometimes to add another thing. But that's why I really keep talking about this, because I'm like, yes, you are adding another thing, but actually that thing is going to make you feel so much better
Mhm.
by maybe putting down some of the crap that you feel you need to do. But actually, if you don't do it, the world will not end. And instead, taking 10 minutes for yourself to get out in your garden, to connect with nature, to feel your hands in the soil, to grow something and grow your pride and your self-confidence again, that is going to be so worth it, rather than, I don't know, sitting on Instagram scrolling for 10 minutes and just like consuming all everyone else's opinions and whatever else. Let's not do that. Let's not fill our
Mm.
minds with more crap. Let's go outside and weed our garden while we weed our minds, and get rid of some of those shitty thoughts that we don't want in there anymore. um
It's
so I think,
interesting. Yeah, you were
yeah,
saying that about women, and I hear this a lot, that women, they don't take time for themselves. They're always doing these kind of, I need to do this, I need to do this. And it feels like adding something on, doing something for themselves. Why do you think women feel so like almost guilty, or like they're unable to do anything for themselves?
because our society only values productivity. It only values you if you are producing, whether that is making money by working, whether that is raising children, whether that is, any we live in a capitalist society, and the way that works is by, for all of us to believe that the only way we're worth something is if we can give of ourselves. So we are raised, especially women, as young little girls, seeing our mothers, giving their all to us, to our families. And for my mum worked full time and raised me and my brother. So she had everything to consider. Which is the same as many women now, right? Like there's not many women that just do one or the other. Especially if you choose to have a family, generally you've got to work as well, because you've got to earn money to pay the mortgage, etc., and then you've got to do the whole home juggle of kids and household stuff as well. So we were raised seeing our mothers basically just keep going and going and going and going, probably very unhappy, probably very mentally unwell, stressed, anxious. And so we copy exactly what they did, because that's what we learn. But I really want to change that. And that is one of my biggest things. I'm raising two little girls. I make a real point of saying, I'm going in the garden now to have 10 minutes for myself, because I need that, because that's how mummy looks after herself and makes herself stay well. And you are here. Your father is here. He's perfectly capable of looking after you. In fact, he's an amazing father. And, I just kind of, I really think to myself, like, I need to show them. It's all well and good saying, oh, you must take care of yourself. It's a whole nother thing for them to actually see you doing it, because then in 20 years' time, when maybe they've got kids or a very busy job or a lot going on in their lives, they will be like, oh, hang on a minute. It's really important that I take 10 minutes for myself to go and do something that makes me feel really good, rather than numbing my emotions with food or
Mm.
whatever other vice they choose. So I think ultimately there's two things at play. There's our conditioning, in that we saw our mothers doing that. I think there's also this thing of like, we're constantly trying to prove our worth,
Mm.
and our society only values productivity. So if we're not doing something that's productive, um, we're not worth anything. And I think as women, so many of us struggle so much with our self-worth, because we're constantly told we're not enough, we're not pretty enough, we're not slim enough, we're not this enough, all of those things, we're not earning enough, whatever it is. And so over time, that message completely erodes our self-worth. So then to stand up and go, do you know what, I'm fucking worth taking 10 minutes for myself. We just can't do it. We just don't have the fire in us to be able to stand up and say, I am worth this. I am worth taking this 10 minutes for myself. We think, no, I'm not worth it. The only thing I'm worth is producing. So I'll just keep giving my all to the rest of my family. And there's another thing of like, there's this weird attitude around like, oh, I'll take some time for myself when I've done all the washing, all the washing up basket
You
is
have to earn
empty.
it.
Yeah, exactly. That we have to, because that's how our society works, right?
Yeah.
You give your time, somebody gives you something in return. Like you give your time, someone gives you a wage. You give your love, someone hopefully gives you love back. That's entirely how it works. And I really want to rewrite that, because I'm like, if, you know, we are worth so much more than giving all of ourselves to everybody else. Because do you know what? We end up resentful, we end up burnt out, we end up exhausted, we end up hating our lives, we end up miserable. Our generation, I don't know how it works in Ireland, but in the UK, supposedly we're going to get a state pension one day. We will not get that. Like, we just will not get that. Like, I'm 30, how old am I? 38 now, I think. Yeah, 38. And, my generation will not get a state pension. We were brought up seeing our parents work hard all of their working lives and then working for retirement, because at retirement at 60, as it was back then, they'd get to stop work and they'd get to live out maybe another 20 years, enjoying their life, enjoying the fruits of their labor, if you will. But we are not going to get that. So
It's already up to
we,
65 here, and I think they're pushing for 67 now at the moment.
yeah, and higher for women than it is for men. What a fucking con that is. But sorry, I'm like getting all like, I need to move
No, I'm
around.
totally,
I'm
oh, I
getting all
love this.
like,
I love
I'm
this.
getting all like ragey about it.
Mm.
But like, we need to enjoy our lives now, because we're not going to get that 20 years of retirement. We're just not. We're probably going to die earlier than our parents. I mean, my dad, bless him, worked so hard all of his life. He retired 2 years later. He got diagnosed with a life-limiting condition, and he died 3 years after that. So he never got to enjoy that. And I think I look back and I think to myself, like, I don't want that. I don't want to get to that age and be like, oh yay, I can finally enjoy myself now, and then I die. Like, I want to enjoy myself now, while I've got my youth. She says 38, but my body
Hold on.
works.
I'm
I
only a few years younger than you. Don't be saying
No, I feel like I'm like middle-aged though, aren't I? Like nearly 40. Like, ooh. My husband just turned 40, so I think that's what's freaking us out a little bit. But I think like when you're in your 20s, right, you can like party and work and you can do it all, and you're not like completely exhausted and you've got youth on your side. But as you start to kind of get into 30s, 40s, like your body starts to say to you, like, I don't know about you, but like if I have a drink now, I am literally written off for like the following week. I just can't
I
like,
have this it's
oh
what I call is like you never know which way it's gonna go. You could have two glasses of wine and be
yeah,
dying, or you
yeah.
could like go on an absolute session and be fine the next day. But it's always in a balance what way it's going. In your 20s, you'll always get away with it. But now, like literally you can look at alcohol wrong and you're like, why am I fucked?
Yeah, exactly. But probably because you've got a load of other stuff going on in your life. You've had a heavy week, like heavy work week, and you're knackered, so it impacts you so much more. Or maybe you're tired, you haven't slept that well, or maybe you haven't moved your body enough. There's so many like factors at play. But I think I wasn't aware of this stuff in my 20s. I just like enjoyed my life, partied hard, probably tried to medicate my crazy brain with alcohol, if I'm really honest, like numbing it. But now I know all of this stuff. I can't keep on at that pace, and I actually don't want to.
Mhm.
I look at some of my friends who jobs that are very all consuming, and I just think to myself, oh, my brain wouldn't cope with that. And I don't think that's just because of the ADHD. I think that's obviously a factor, but I think everybody's got a busy brain now. Like, there's so much trying to grab our attention constantly, and there's so many things we have to remember, that I think we really need to start putting steps in place to quiet our minds in whatever way we can do that. And obviously for me, my chosen modality is the garden, and or I also love swimming. Actually, that's another thing that I really enjoy. Or if I don't fancy the garden, I just go out for a big walk, like, and just get in nature. Like, it doesn't have to, like, some people don't have gardens, and I get that, but I think like you know, we've got a responsibility to enjoy our lives. Like, life is such a gift. You know, I just think, like, I want to die. And in fact, I literally did some morning pages this morning on a journal prompt that was like, if you were to die, or if you left this earth tomorrow, what would your regrets be? And I was like, oh, this is a biggie. But
Oh,
do you know what I mean? Like, it made me think, like, I don't want to die like having thought, oh, I should. No one's going to go die and say, oh, I should have worked a bit harder. I really don't think that that is true. I think we all work far too hard.
mhm.
Um, but nobody wants to talk about that because, you know, the powers that be, and I hate to say it, but like the rich white men that run our country want you to keep working because they can keep creaming your value for that, you know, taking your value. And I don't want to give it to them anymore. Like, I want to make money for me and my family, and I want to educate, yeah, you know, and support women to find that power in themselves as well. And I think the garden is a wonderful tool to do that, because it's kind of taking us back to basics,
Yeah.
like, you know, back to the day where we all had to bloody grow our food because I couldn't just pop over Sainsbury's and like get everything we want, you know. So yeah, we've gone off on a massive tangent there,
No,
but
I
there we
totally
go.
love this. ADHD. This is what happens
Yes.
when two people with ADHD get together. I actually want to
Oh,
bring it back to that for a second because you said you
yeah,
got diagnosed with ADHD at 36.
yeah.
What was it like finding that out at that age?
Amazing, amazing, like amazing, and really sad at the same time. And there's a few reasons for that. Amazing because, like, I'd suspected I'd had it for a really long time. So in classic ADHD style, I like got myself referred. We have this thing called like right to choose
Okay.
in the UK, in the UK, and you can basically get your doctor to refer you to them. So they're a private company, but they have a contract, if you will, with the NHS to provide uh, you know, they do assessments and diagnoses for free for you as the user. Um, and so I got referred, and then they sent me loads of forms to fill in, which I was like, oh, I don't want to fill these forms. Like, I don't
Of
like
course I
filling
don't.
forms at the best of times. I really don't want to fill these forms that are asking me to dig through all my struggles. Like, that just sounds horrible. I'll avoid that one. And it also had asked me to ask a close family member to fill in a form. And I had not told any of my family members that I even suspected I had ADHD. So I sat on that for a good year and a half. And then I thought, do you know, I probably need to get on and do this. Like, it's a bit ridiculous. So I booked the appointment. And that made me have that classic deadline that I really need in order to do the forms. So I did the forms. I, at that point, had to not fess up, but like say to my husband, can you fill this form in? Because I think I might have ADHD, and they've asked for a family member to fill in this form. So he filled in the form, and he sent it to me, and I sent it on to person, and I looked at the form, and he had answered no, that I didn't struggle with any of the symptoms for every single thing. And I was like, oh, fucking hell. Like, A, what does this mean for the diagnosis? But also, like, how can he realize that I'm not struggling? That I'm struggling
Hmm.
with all of these things. And it was like, I clearly haven't been very open about the things that I'm struggling with in classic style. I'd just been keeping them all inside, you know, like struggling with something, getting frustrated with myself, speaking to myself like shit because I couldn't do the thing that I really wanted to do. I couldn't make my brain do what I wanted it to do. And instead of like sharing that with like the person that's closest to me in my life, I just kept it all inside and was horrible to myself about it. So once I got that diagnosis, it was like this huge flood of relief, as to be like, I'm not broken. Like, my brain just works a little bit differently. And it allowed me to give myself grace, I suppose, that I didn't have to be so horrible to myself. That, like, if I couldn't get my brain to do something, instead of being like, oh, why won't you do this? I could be like, right, what can I do to gamify this, or to make it fun, or make it something that I want to go and do?
Yeah.
So it allowed me to get creative, which I love to do. Like, I'm a really creative person, with the things in life that you have to do, like you have to call up the doctors to book an appointment or do those annoying bloody tasks that no one really wants to do, but you've got to do it. So I would do things like, right, you know, I need to call the doctors. That's a great example. I know it's going to be a battle. I'm going to be on the phone for ages trying to get a bloody appointment. I'm going to do it. And then after that, I'm going to get out in the garden, or I'm going to go and do something fun that I really want to do. I'm going to have a chat with a friend. So I could kind of like, I kind of now can hack my brain a bit more to like make myself do those things that I don't really want to do. But it also, after I'd kind of gotten over the initial like, yay, I'm not like completely broken and I'm actually just great actually, but my brain just works differently and I'm used to that. But then came quite a lot of sadness for a few reasons. One, because I felt really sad for like me all through the years, who had just been so horrible to herself because she couldn't get her brain to do what she wanted. And that, you know, that I guess I was frustrated because I was like, God, if I'd known about this however many years ago, like just think how much of an easier ride I would have given myself. And then the other reason was my family don't really accept it. My husband is like, he doesn't understand. He's like, why? I don't understand how you could have been a forensic scientist for all those years, like sitting, looking down the microscope, searching like, you know, a black jacket for tiny blood spots. He's like, I don't understand how you could do that if you have ADHD, like how you'd be able to focus on that. And I was like, well, and I got frustrated because I was like, well, look, if you knew anything about how ADHD works, the reason I can do that is because I'm really interested in finding out like what has happened in this case. Can I find any blood? What do the blood patterns tell me? And you know, when you find that tiny little blood spot and you've been searching that jacket for like 3 days and you find that tiny blood spot, the dopamine hit is like the best thing on this earth, you know? Yep. So like I was frustrated because I was like, I felt like they just wrote it off before, like my mum still won't even discuss it with me. Like I told her about it. She went, oh, okay. And then has literally never said anything about it again. Not like, you know, is there anything I can do to support you? Like, I'm so sorry that you struggled all these years. And I think a lot of it is like a guilt thing, but they shouldn't feel guilty because I never told them that I was struggling so much. Mm-hmm. I just kept it all in, you know, like I think many of us as women are conditioned to be the good girl, to be easy, to not make a fuss, to not speak up when you know, we're struggling. And that is why so many women are getting diagnosed late, mm-hmm. because their hormones kick in when they either have children or they get towards perimenopause and they can no longer mask all of the shit that they've kept inside for that long. And that is why. And obviously there's a lot more awareness now, but you know, little boys or men generally, and you know, that's not, I know some men are late diagnosed as well, but on the whole it gets picked up much quicker. You know, the whole diagnostic criteria is geared towards to men and boys. Like there's nothing about, I think they're now rewriting it. Certainly in the UK there's talk of them rewriting the diagnostic criteria to try and, you know, gear it more towards women. But you know, little girls struggle to vocalize how they're struggling, whereas as women, you know, we might be able to put more words to the things that we're experiencing, which is another reason why, you know, people are getting diagnosed later in life. But young girls who are socialized to just kind of suck it up and get on with it, no one's ever aware that they're struggling. So yeah, so it's been a ride, that's for sure. Like it's been hard, and it still continues to be. Like I feel like I still have to battle with a lot of misunderstanding from people.
Yes, that's the hardest, I think.
And I think generally society is quite unforgiving, shall we say. They're just like, oh, just get on with it. And it's like, well, I have been getting on with it for 37 years and it hasn't really worked out that well for me. So don't get me wrong, I did very well at school. I've got 2 degrees. You know, I had a really successful career in the forensics industry, which is notoriously like challenging to get into, because I was a bloody tryhard, you know, because I felt so shit about myself that I just worked my ass off to try and prove that I was worth something. And that's why I did so well. I know not everybody that has ADHD has that experience, but that was my experience. And I think no one ever worried about me because I did well. oh, you're doing well at school, you're achieving, you're getting a good job, you're doing that, you're not a problem. So then for me to turn around at 38, or you know, how old was I, 36, when I got diagnosed, and say to my family, I've actually got this thing that I've really been struggling with all my life, I think they were like, what the fuck, like, where has this come from? Like,
You've been
we thought
grand.
you were the easy one,
Mm.
you know. And now you're telling us actually you've had all these problems. So yeah, that was pretty hard, to be fair. But you know, we're getting through it. It's getting better all the time. I'm educating them. I'm trying to share more with them about like the internal workings of my mind, which is scary because, you know, you think, God, if I'm honest about this, what if they reject me? What if they don't want to be with me anymore? Or what if they don't want to spend time with me because, you know, they're very neurotypical and they've got real opinions about these things.
But
That's really
one of
hard.
them has it because it's hereditary. So one of them has it.
Well, yeah,
I can
exactly.
pinpoint
So
exactly in my family who has it just from getting the diagnosis. I'm like, I know where it came from. It was my dad.
yeah,
He has a
yeah.
sister who definitely has a bit of it as well, and one of her
Mm,
kids, at least one, if not two of her kids, and like one of them's a doctor, and you're like,
yeah.
see, you can be completely successful, but he definitely has ADHD.
Yeah. And I think very often, you know, well, not very often, but a lot of people do are very, especially if you've got, like, for me, it really manifested like a busy brain.
Hmm.
So my brain's constantly worrying. So I love to learn, I love to consume some information. So of course I'm going to do well in school because school teaches us, read this book, take it all in and spit it back out again in your exam. You
I
know,
had to
this,
have some form of interest in it. Like
yeah,
I
true.
actually, we have like, so our leaving cert, I think is like the A levels in England. We
Okay.
do 7 subjects and you pick 4 subjects. And I strategically at the time picked um biology, home economics because they were both learning work and interlinked. German because I was already good at it. I
Mm,
like languages, and I did art because I liked it, but I didn't get the marks I wanted in it because fuck their system.
yeah.
But like that was, I realize now I was like, I was making life as easy for me as possible because I couldn't be arsed with school. And I did
Yeah.
very well in the leaving cert. And I'm just like, the signs were there.
Yeah, yeah. It is. I mean, for me, I did three sciences and maths. Like, God, what a loser! But that's what I was interested in. So I knew that I would be able to be good at them. Like, I hated English at school. I did okay in it because I forced myself to like do the tasks, and I couldn't bear to like be seen as like somebody who wasn't doing well because that would have like imploded my whole like good girl facade. So I literally just like forced my brain into it. Well, you know, when I think about some of the things that I've done to my brain, I felt that that's what makes me really sad, is like I've forced it to do really, like, kicking and screaming doesn't want to do. And
Mhm.
yet I did it because that's what society and all the people around me told me I needed to do. But you know, I think like going back to the education system, like I don't know what it's like in Ireland, but oh my goodness, in the UK it is just so, there is no room for any kind of personality, for any kind of creativity. You know, it is literally like digest this information and then spit it back out. Like, there's no room for like teaching children to like trust in their intuition. In fact, it's absolutely the opposite, I feel
Oh,
like. And you know, that's a big part of the work that I do with women now, is like helping them to trust back in their intuition. Because when you have every ounce of autonomy stripped from you in school and then in the workplace, many workplaces are the same. You know, they basically just want you to be like a number, a faceless number. You It's really hard to like trust in your own intuition because you're not utilizing it and using it on a daily basis. So one of the big things, you know, and I actually did like a post on this yesterday, I think, like, was kind of, my garden really helped me to get my intuition back and really trust in myself again. Because you know, when I first started gardening, I just kind of consumed all the gardening books. Like, what can I read and learn, like I'd been taught to in school, to
ADHD, hyper
help me
focus.
to do this thing. Yeah, exactly. But actually, when I really got successful at gardening and started to grow a garden that really felt like me and felt really like comforting to me, which is what I'm all about, you know, helping women create a garden that sets their heart on fire. You can't create a garden that sets your heart on fire if you're copying someone else's blueprint, if you're just like regurgitating what's in a book. You
Mhm.
have to really get connected with that space and connect with yourself to really understand what you like. Like, there was a point in my life where I was so burnt out. I couldn't even decide what to have for dinner. I didn't even, like, if I went out to a restaurant to eat, I couldn't choose, because I just was just completely like a shell of my former self. And many of the women, you know, that come to work with me, they're like, oh, I don't know what plants I want to have in the garden. And I'm like, right, okay, well, let's think about these things. How does this make you feel? How does that make you feel? Like, all of my work is kind of, in fact, that's where I start with every client, is like, how do you want your garden to make you feel? Like, what do you want to feel when you go out there? Do you want to feel energized? Do you want to feel like relaxed? Do you want to feel peaceful? And then we start bringing elements in that are gonna help them to feel like that. But I think when you are so overwhelmed and overstuffed with information, there's no space there to make those decisions. So that's why it's so important to just start taking little steps and little pockets of time for yourself in the garden, just, you know, doing a bit of weeding, or just even just sitting out there and noticing what's growing in the garden can really help you to start getting that headspace. And then once you get that headspace and you've trained your brain to, you know that when you go outside, there's going to be that nice space up there and your mind's not going to be worrying quite so much. That's when you can start to like bring things in, like, oh, what do I actually like, you know? So yeah, so I think that is really important. And I think maybe the education program will get there one day, but for the meantime, I'm going to be teaching my kids to do all these things in the garden, because what a better like learning space than, you know, out in nature. So yeah.
It's interesting you're saying like they don't know what they want. Do when someone comes to work with you, do they kind of almost expect you to go, okay, so this is how we're going to, like the gardening book, they're going to say, this is how we're going to build a garden?
Yes and no. So I think if they just want somebody to think about it for them, they're just going to get a garden designer, right? They just pay someone an inordinate amount of cash to like create a nice garden for them. I think people, when they start to work with me, they realize, because I talk a lot about this, like, you cannot create a garden that you adore if you are not part of the creation, like if you don't have an input. So people obviously look at a lot of stuff online. They look at Pinterest, they look at Instagram, they're like, oh, I want to do something like this. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's talk about why you want to create something like that. What is it about that you like? And it, like, yes, I could just help them recreate that exact picture. But when we pick it apart, sometimes it's like, oh, well, I really like the look of that like seating area with the fire pit, because I really want to be able to have my friends over and connect with my friends. But I really don't like that part. I actually don't like that that planting scheme there. Or it might be, I really like that planting scheme, you know, the different colors and the shapes of the plants, because it looks like really bright and energetic, and that's what I really feel. So people bring their ideas, of course they do, but I force them to kind of look at why they want to have those things, because I think, again, that's all about building the connection. You know, if you don't really know why you like something, you can put it in your garden, and then in a year's time you're like, oh, I'm not sure if I really like that thing anymore. You know, whereas if you've done that work before and you've been like, right, this is why I like it, and then once we've put that thing in the garden and it starts to give you the effect you're after, it's reinforcing that, oh, that's why it's in the garden, because it's re-energizing me every time I see those plants, or it's every time I have my friends around, I feel really connected and held and loved and supported, you know. So that's why it's really important to connect like the feelings, which, you know, like I said at the start, doesn't come naturally for many of us. So on the face of it, it's creating a nice garden, but it's so much more than that, because it actually helps you to rediscover who you are, maybe. And that might be a different person than it was before you had your burnout episode, or had your children, or had, you know, that huge job that just completely took everything out of you. But I do find most people that come to work with me have had some sort of big life event, whether that's an ADHD diagnosis, a burnout experience, or I don't want to call it experience, episode, or, you know, they've had kids and now they're like, I feel a bit lost, like this has really rocked my world, and I feel like I need to have a bit of connection with nature to help me like reconnect with myself again. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And also, okay, I know what you do would maybe considered quite niche, mindful
Yeah.
gardening. It's probably, well, in Ireland anyway, I don't think I've heard of anyone doing it. I'm not sure if there's many in the UK. Um, what is it like? What are the reactions you get off people when you tell them that's what you do?
I mean, I guess everyone, how much time do you ever get to talk to anyone? That's why I love doing podcasts, right? Because you can get really into like deep chats. When you meet someone and they're like, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm a mindful gardening coach. They're like, oh, what's that? A bit like you were at the start. So I tend to kind of dumb it down a little bit, and I go, oh, I teach people to garden to, support their mental well-being and their mental health. And people kind of get that a bit more. Um, if there's a chance that you get a really good chat, because invariably people will ask a little bit more about it, you can go into a bit more detail, and I talk about maybe how I might do that with my workshops. I talk about some of the things I've spoken about here with you. But how deep do you ever really get with people? I guess for me, I try and do a lot of the stuff we've discussed today through like bits of content, but I know that the internet is busy, right? And people don't have tons of time to sit and consume. In fact, I'm a bit of an oxymoron, because I say to people, get off of Instagram and get out in your garden. It will make you feel better. But then there I am posting on Instagram.
Read
Do
my
you know what I
Instagram,
mean? So it
please.
is a little bit like, oh, but you've got to meet the people where they're at, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it's people are initially a little bit like, oh, I don't really understand this. But then once we got chatting, people are always fascinated, because invariably they like, I don't know, there's something really simple like a doctor, or, something that you say one word and you explain, and then it explains immediately what you do. But people are always quite fascinated by it, because they're like, oh, you've just kind of made that job title up for yourself. And I'm like, well, yeah, I have. But like, I I don't want to just be, and maybe it's the ADHD thing, that like not wanting to be the same as everyone else probably is a little bit. My parents always said that to me, and I was just like, why can't you just be the same as everyone else? I'm like, because I'm not. Like, I don't want to be the bloody same as everyone else. Like, I am who I am, and I don't want to bloody not be me. And for a long time, I did kind of dull my edges, if you will, to kind of fit in and stay safe. But it made me like not very well. So now I don't really want to do that anymore. And I think the diagnosis has really helped with that, because it's given me like a validation of like, yeah, when you've been told that message your whole life, it's hard to kind of to just push yourself through it anyway. But I think it's really important, because I feel like there's other people out there that need to see somebody doing that. So I'm trying to do that, and I'm trying to own it and just be who I am, because it's exhausting actually trying to be somebody else that I'm not. And so I'd rather just show who I am, and I hope my kids and other young people who are neurospicy, if you will, or just neurotypical, but just like really want to own who they are. I think it's important for them to have role models. And I think when I was younger, I used to think, oh, I'll be a role model to other people by being a great forensic scientist, or getting a good degree. And then I'm like, actually, it's kind of like bollocks, really. Like, I want to do more than that. I really want to change like how society views women and how women view themselves within society, because I think society's never going to change their view on us all the while we're just fucking fitting in and behaving. So I talk a lot about like joining my mindful gardening revolution, because as ridiculous as it is, that taking time for yourself to connect with nature, to quiet your mind whilst you're out in your garden, is a revolutionary act. It is, because not enough of us are doing it. Not enough of us are standing up and rebelling. And I'm not saying that everybody that comes into my world or works with me has to like be as vocal as I am about it, but by getting yourself out in the garden every day, that's a very small act of rebellion that you can take for yourself, that will help you start to grow that power. And who knows what will happen in the future. Maybe I'll cultivate some of the world's future leaders. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Female leaders. But yeah, so I just think like there's small little things that we can do to really help ourselves to grow that power again. The power that let's be honest, our patriarchal society doesn't want us to have. But I think it's really important that we do have.
No, I think you're right. Like it's so true. I like the way you said that as well, like behave.
Yeah.
It is like, isn't it? Like, girls, just be quiet there now and behave. And I think
Yeah.
especially if you're someone who grew up with ADHD, you were definitely one that was not behaving a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny when I think back to like my school years, because you know, I was a classic good girl, but then there were definitely moments like through my school years where actually like I would like do something, and then the teachers would be like, this is unusual behavior, why have you're so good and quiet usually, what's going on? But I think it was just me like being like desperate to get out, like, come on, let me just be who I actually am, you know. So like I said, you can't keep it down forever, so what's the point in trying, because it's really tiring. So
Yeah.
try and embrace your quirks.
I was a bit like that as well, actually, because I was generally like 90% of the time grand student. And then, well, when I was younger, actually, I was friends with a lad who I think actually had ADD as well. I think he actually got diagnosed with it at the time because, he was one of those really troublesome people. And at the time, it was still only ADD, and it was really only boys that ever got diagnosed with it. But when I was with him, chaos. When we were
Yeah.
separated, no longer. And then I was in eighth,
Yeah.
but every so often, just something would happen with me. Like I'd be pissed off with something the teacher's saying, or I didn't like the way they were running the class, and I'd just be a fucking nightmare.
Yeah. And this is the thing, isn't it? It's like that overstimulation that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. You can't keep it in like forever. So, but there's definitely things that you can learn about how your brain works in order to help yourself to feel better. Not to like toe the line in society. I'm not saying that, but to help yourself to feel less overwhelmed, because that's not a nice feeling, is it? When you completely lose it. It's like the worst thing in the world. So because you feel shit, and then invariably you get punished
Yeah.
for doing it by either the school or the workplace or people around you. So um it's, yeah, I think it's important to try and find some things that you can do for you to, and then for me that's the garden is like how I stay on a level. So
Mhm.
like, yes, of course, like we all go through shitty times every now and again, right? But if I didn't have my garden as like a regular constant, I'd be like constantly operating like up here ready to blow. But because I'm regularly in my garden, like connecting with the soil and mother nature, I feel like that, like it's almost like all of the like angstiness kind of goes into the soil, so I'm like getting rid of a little bit of it, so then when something happens that potentially would have sent me over the edge, my levels are so much lower that it doesn't, yes, of course I get more stress, but I don't completely lose it. So um yeah, there we go.
That makes sense. So, what advice do you have for women who want to take that time for themselves but don't feel like they can't? They can.
So I think a lot of that is looking at why you feel like that and getting really honest with yourself. Like just grab a pen and paper. If I'm actually quite like to talk to another person to process my feelings, but I appreciate that not everybody always wants to hear my like random rambles, and I don't want to pay for a therapist forever. So I've started quite recently actually writing my thoughts out. And that has been really useful. So even just writing down what you've just said there. So like, I want to take more time for myself, but I don't feel I can. Why is that? And just keep asking why, and start writing. And your brain's probably pretty full, so shite will just come out. You don't ever have to reread it if you don't want to. But I find something about a pen and paper really helps to kind of get that introspection, and you can do it for 5 minutes. You don't have to do it for hours of time. I'd also really encourage people to look at where they are spending their time, because so many of my clients come to me and they say, oh, I just haven't got time for that, or I can't take time for myself. But then they'll sit and scroll on Instagram for 20 minutes, or sit and stare at a Netflix documentary for an hour that they're not even really taking in. So if that's something that you want to do, great. But I can guarantee you that scrolling on Instagram for 20 minutes is not going to help your brain, but potentially getting outside in the garden will. I also think start really small. Just start with 5 minutes. Like you can find 5 minutes. You absolutely can find 5 minutes. Like, so much of what we tell ourselves are stories about the fact that we need to do all the chores before we can take time. For me, actually, the minute I get back from the school run, I go out in my garden, because I find that if I schedule it in for later in the day, and I do schedule everything in my diary, which helps me,
Same, I love doing it.
I will get caught up in something else, and then I'll go, oh, it's fine, I'll do garden tomorrow, and then of course it never happens, and I get to the end of the day and I feel disappointed in myself that I didn't take that time. So I find if I do it as early in the day as I can, like, I appreciate other people might have like work to get to or commutes or whatever, but if you can get up a bit earlier and get straight out in the garden, if you are, say, dropping kids at school and then out of the house all day, once the kids are in bed, we're into the summertime now. Once the kids are in bed, the minute they're down in bed, go straight out into the garden and just take 5 minutes for yourself out there before you flop on the sofa. If they're anything like me, that's exactly what I do. I like go out there for sort of 10-20 minutes, watering my plants, just have a little wander about, and then I do go and flop on the sofa. But I know that I've had that good time for my brain outside, so it's going to feel a little bit more on a level. I use that as like a wind down almost, so then I can go chat to my husband or sit on the sofa or whatever. But that, I think, is really key, is just starting really early in the day, starting small, just telling yourself just 5 minutes. And if you are worried about it, you can set a timer if you want to. So what I quite often do, if I am on a really tight schedule, because I'll go out there for 5 minutes and then like half an hour later I'm still out there, which is no bad thing, but I appreciate like people have schedules to keep to. So if I'm worried about I've only got 5-10 minutes, I will set a timer for that time, and I will, again, gamify it, see how much I can get done in that time. I think so often we tell ourselves that, like, doing the garden, we need like a whole bloody weekend to get it done. But actually, it's very much, or I advocate very much for like a little and often, because not only is that better for your mind, and your body, but also it just feels more realistic. Like, whoever gets a whole free weekend, like, there's invariably some kid's birthday party or some social event to go to. So I think if you can find little pockets and try and do the same time every day if you can, so really kind of create it as like a healthy habit. And then another really useful thing is get someone to hold you accountable. Could be a friend, maybe you'll do it together. Maybe you'll be like, oh yeah, do you know what, you're going to listen to this podcast, you're going to tell your friend about it, you're going to be like, I found this really interesting lady, she's all about getting in the garden, why don't we join her Substack, and then we could do the gardening together, and then you can hold each other accountable. You can text and say, oh, I've just done that activity from her Substack newsletter, what did you think of it, how did it make you feel? And then you've kind of got someone there to do it with you. Like, you're not telling me that people listening to this almost certainly have many burnt out, tired, exhausted friends that could do with getting out in their garden as well. So, or you could ask your partner. I probably wouldn't, because I think my partner would be like, oh, taking time for yourself again, like taking the piss a little bit. So I would probably, personally, for me, yeah, exactly, fine, fuck off. I hope it's okay to swear, I didn't check that actually.
No, don't care.
Yeah, oh good. But yeah, so I think getting a friend doing it with you is really nice, because then you almost go on like a journey together as well. But a lot of places offer these kind of like community gardens you can go to. So if people don't have a garden, they could do that. But for me, it is really about, if you have got your own garden space, trying to connect you in with that, because then it's literally right outside your house, and you can, whenever, anytime you're feeling like stressed, overwhelmed, once you've like cultivated that relationship with it, like for me now, I go out into my garden and immediately like my body just relaxes, because it knows that it's gonna like get a bit of downtime out there. So yeah, and like I said, the accountability thing is a big one, because I think it's really easy. Like, if you think about, especially as ADHD, of the things, I mean, I pretty much don't do anything if I don't have a deadline. So if or for me, if I know that someone's checking in with me later that day, have I done that thing I promised myself I'd do? Whether it's work, whether it's like something nice for me, if I know they're going to be checking in with me, I'm going to do the thing, because play on that good girl conditioning a little bit. Use it to your advantage, and get it to help you do something that's going to make you feel good.
Yeah, no, that's Really good idea. It's interesting listening to you describing that because there's so many parallels for me with fitness with people. Like, it's the same thing. It's like I need to do 3 hour workout. No one has time for a
Yeah.
3 hour workout. 10 minute walk will make a huge difference. Go
Yeah.
like accountability, having that social element. Like I would say a lot of the people clients come to our gym, come to classes, they become friends from going to the
Yeah.
gym, and they have
Yeah.
mates that they see at the gym now. Like it's all these elements that are make it so much more accessible, and like you are doing like the self-care as well, going to the gym. And it's just interesting just hearing all those things you're listing off. And I'm like, this is all the shit I talk about when I'm trying to get
Yeah.
people to like try fitness.
Yeah, this is the thing though, like it's not, none of it is new, right? It's just presented in a slightly different way with a different modality. I think like the community thing is key though, because um I think many of us are quite lonely, like we're like giving of ourselves all of the time to everybody else. We're giving of ourselves all the time to work, you know, but actually like how many of us actually have genuine true connection? Like I
Mm.
could probably list on one hand people that I think really truly know me, like really know me. Um, and that's mad because I've got a lot of people in my life, but how many of them do I really feel connected with that I could like genuinely share something big with? Not very many. And I think I'd like to grow that, I would like to grow that. So I think if you can feel really connected with someone, a really nice way to get connected is having a shared hobby, doing those things together. So yeah, I think that's a great thing to do. And whether it is the gym, whether it's something else, whether it's gardening, like I think uh sometimes it's just about making that choice for yourself. Like I want something more than being an exhausted donkey for the rest of
Yeah.
my life. And this is what I'm going to try to help me get there. And you know what? Another thing we haven't talked about, which I think is interesting, is the concept of failure. Because I think for many of us, we are very unwilling to try new things because we're worried we're going to do them wrong.
Yeah.
And especially as women, it is not safe to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Society punishes us, and school and parents and work. If you make a mistake, Jesus, especially in the industry I worked in, if I made a mistake at work, it was like a whole blooming, well, potentially a whole court case could go wrong, like that is a lot of pressure that we're under. And we don't want to add to that pressure by trying something and allowing ourselves to be a beginner in case we do it wrong. But actually, the only way that we can get ourselves unstuck from feeling like fed up is by trying those new things. And what happens if you try a new thing? You go to the gym or you try to grow some plants, the plants die. It's really not the end of the world. And no one's going to be there to tell you off. The only thing that is going to happen if you've got a trainer like you or a coach like me, we're going to be there to say, right, what happened? What could we change next time? Let's kind of reset and try again. And that's how we build resilience. Like people bang on, don't they, about our generation not having any resilience. The reason we don't have any resilience is because there's no space to like have any thoughts, to have any resilience. We don't, we have not been allowed to develop resilience because every time we do something wrong, we're just absolutely like blasted for it. There's never any let's review what happened, what change can we make, let's try again. There's never support. It's just like beating with a stick, basically, like not obviously
You shouldn't have fucking
physically,
done
but
that. Yeah, I know that, but
yeah. Yeah, but thanks so much for that like really good observation there. Obviously I know I shouldn't have done it. How are you going to help me to change that? And in all of the years that I've worked for other people, I've probably had one boss that actually was really collaborative in the way that they supported me when something did go wrong. Like I think that's really the sign of a true leader, is like when things go wrong, how are you there to help and support, rather than just blasting somebody and being an absolute asshole to them. They're already feeling bad enough, trust me. Especially if they've got ADHD, they're really fucking giving themselves shit. So like how can you support? And I think that's really key for us as facilitators, um, coaches, to be there in the moment, in the tough times, and be like, right, what can we try? Maybe it was this, let's try this next time. And really be there as a support, because I think many women, and the way that like society and online world is, it's like someone makes a mistake and we just want to fucking vilify them for it. You know, we want to jump on and tell them what a shit person they are. And actually, like, it's human to make a mistake. Like, you show me a single person in this, like, in their world, that in this world, that has never made a mistake. Like, there's literally no way that you could find somebody. So why are we beating each other up for something that is so natural? And that is what makes people scared to even try new things. And it really breaks my heart, because I feel like you have to try new things, because if you're not happy with your life the way that it is, what, you're just going to continue being unhappy? Or are you going to find somebody that's going to support you to try something new and um potentially change your life to be better? Like,
It's
why
kind of
wouldn't you give
easier
that
to
a
be
bash?
unhappy though, isn't it? Because then you can complain about everything and people will give you sympathy.
Yeah, but people do people though? I don't think people do. I think people are like, oh, fucking get over yourself,
I
you
find, well,
know?
you have to, yeah, no, that's, I don't know, maybe I've always been really adverse to it because I don't like telling, because I don't want people going, oh, yeah, all right. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, leave me alone.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same. Yeah, like I don't make a big deal of, like, you know, like when my dad died or whatever. I think I didn't really post much about it online, because I was like, I don't really need like randomers on the internet that I don't know giving me sympathy. Like, I'm really overwhelmed with emotion anyway. But like, I think I think certain people do like to complain. I get that. But I think the people that we're talking to know that they need to make a change,
Yes.
because they wouldn't be fucking listening to this podcast
Exactly.
if they just wanted to complain about their life. You know, the people that we're talking to are out there wanting to, there's something in them that they just can like feel is not right. You know, that it doesn't, they're not happy. And Jesus, I mean, I'm not saying every day is sunshine and rainbows in my life. Like, obviously there's days I get out of bed, especially when the babies woke me up at 5 a.m. I'm like, oh God, this day's going to be hell. But I know if I can get out in the garden for 10 minutes, or I can go for a swim, I can change that day around a little bit, or certainly take it up a couple of notches on the scale of how good is my day going to be. And it's finding those little things. I think people call them glimmers, don't they? I've heard that kind of phrase bandied around. Those little glimmers that you can kind of pepper throughout your day to kind of raise that mood a couple of steps. That's what's going to kind of help you on those tougher days. But generally, I would say, since I found gardening, my life is like 100 times better. And then since I got that ADHD diagnosis, even more so, just because it kind of gave me a bit of an explanation as to
Mhm.
why my brain was the way it was.
It's
But
interesting
yeah,
like
I
you
think,
saying that, because like I'm the exact same, and even I would say bringing up the ADHD thing loads whenever the saying of ADHD, and my ex used to be like, why do you keep saying about that? Like, what's the thing? And I was like, because it fucking makes so much sense now.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
like,
and also I think there's an element of you wanting for them to say that must have been really fucking hard for you growing up, not
except
knowing
instead
you
they
had
go,
that.
so you're just
Yeah.
distracted easily. I'm like, no.
Yeah. That, I mean, that is the biggest thing that
Mm.
drives me wild, is the gaslighting, right? Is the, oh, everyone has a bit of that. No, 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 they don't. Because if we did, if everyone had a bit of it, then
Nothing
we
would get
wouldn't
done.
fucking, we wouldn't bloody struggle quite so much in this world that's set up for neurotypical people. You know, like, yes, everyone has their personality quirks, right? Like, everyone's personalities are slightly different. And even within people that have ADHD, like, certain people experience it in different ways, or certain people have found workarounds for certain symptoms that actually means they can manage them quite well. Whether that's completely by accident, or whether that is because they've done research and come up with solutions. But it's very frustrating when people are like, oh, well, yeah, everyone's a bit like that. And it's like, no, that's really not the case at all. Like, how about you actually read about it, learn about it,
Mm.
and then come to me and we can have a discussion. But when I first got diagnosed, I felt awkward when people said stuff like that. And I just kind of went, mm. And now when people say stuff, I just go back at them and I'm like, and I'm like, please do some research and then have a conversation with me. But until that time, I can't really explain to you about how ADHD works, because it's really exhausting. And actually, I don't feel like I should have to. Like, if you want to have a conversation with me, fine, but please at least inform yourself before you try and have a conversation with me, because I haven't got the time to inform you. Like, that's not my if I was an ADHD coach, maybe that would be my like life's work, right? But I just kind of think like in a social situation, I don't really want to have those conversations. I don't want to have to be explaining myself. I feel like I'm having to explain myself
Yes,
to people.
it
And
is. I feel like
and I've
that.
had to do that my whole life. I don't want to keep doing that. So um yeah, it's a tough
One
one.
thing I thought was quite interesting is I have a friend who has what would have been called Asperger's.
Mm,
It's now rebranded ASD. So he
mm,
feels like when he tells people he basically has to tell people he's autistic now,
yeah,
which he says people automatically assume like Rain Man level. Whereas
yeah.
before, Asperger's is kind of seen as the less severe version, and he
Mm,
doesn't like that. And I was like, I literally feel the opposite about AHE. It needs a rebrand because people just think you get distracted by butterflies and stuff.
yeah,
And there's way
yeah,
more to it. And you're like, I wish people would take those like types of like diagnoses or whatever, they take them seriously.
yeah. I
Don't.
think though, I think a lot of that down though is down to certainly people in my world is like I present as quite a together person.
Mm.
Like, I like we said before, we did okay in school, never really caused any problems. Yeah, okay, I've struggled for anxiety my whole life, and had a major burnout episode. But generally, like in the day to day, I do okay. So I think people are like, oh, well, it's not that life. It doesn't really limit your life. You're fine. But actually, because so much of mine is internalized, my brain's a bloody bin fire. Do you know what I mean? But they don't know that because I don't tell them.
Yes.
Because I feel like, do they need to have that burden on them?
Mm.
Maybe I should. Maybe I should be more honest about that. I don't know. I just feel like I have got a bit better. Like, if I feel very overstimulated at times, I just say to my husband, I just need to go outside for 10 minutes. I'm feeling really overstimulated. And he's like, okay. And don't get me wrong, he gets overstimulated, even though he's neurotypical. Um, but I feel like it's a whole nother level with ADHD because you've already got that background noise and then a load of extra external sensory inputs. It just is like, and I just know that when I say that to him, it's like I need to get away from this because otherwise I'm going to explode, and then I'm going to lose my temper, shout at everybody, and everyone will be sad. So I know if I can just take myself away for 10 minutes, come back, then I'll feel better.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that's interesting. And I think the difficulty is because everybody does experience it so differently. Like, some people with their ADHD can't, really struggle to like even shower and get dressed and all of those kind of things. I don't have that, but maybe that's because I've like trained myself to like behave in a neurotypical way. I don't know. This is the problem, right? When you get diagnosed so late.
Yeah, it's funny, like, because I wouldn't be the biggest fan of doing a lot of those things, but I still do them, so it probably is the training. But again, it's
Yeah.
like, I have to shower. Like, if I have to shower twice a day, I fucking hate it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
See,
and
it's
it's
funny, isn't it? Like sometimes I think in the mornings, because I've got little kids who like wake me up all through the night, I really look forward to my shower because A, it's 10 minutes peace away from like chaos in the mornings, but also it's like a wake up thing. I use it to like wake my body up.
mm,
So I think I quite look forward to it for that reason. But then it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm trying to use it as like a space, like a quiet space for myself. But then there's all the sensory inputs of the shower, like the shower, So I don't know. It's funny. I quite like touch though. I know a lot of ADHD people struggle with touch, don't they?
yeah.
But I'm a very touchy person. Like I like to be touched. That sounds such a weird thing to say. So I quite like showers, but I know some people really struggle with that
See, once
sensation.
I'm in a shower, I don't mind it. It's
It's the
just, I think
thought of
it's
it, is
because
it?
it's too boring.
Yeah, maybe.
And it's just really mundane. Like two things I despise doing is getting petrol and going shopping for food.
Oh
And
yeah, I mean,
I've
God.
no reason for it. It's just because they're really boring.
Yeah,
But like
yeah,
I do get the touch thing. I do not like people touching me. I don't like people hugging with me. Like if I hug people voluntarily, it's generally because I'm comfortable with them.
yeah.
At the time I get stuck hugging people that I don't want to hug. Not, and it's not against the person. It's just they're like, we'll
You
hug,
don't
and I'm
know them
like,
very
oh,
well.
shit again.
Yeah. I've got a friend the same actually who hates hugs. It's really interesting to me though, because as a kid, I wouldn't let other people touch me.
Mm-hmm.
My mum says like she used to take me to a toddler group, and if a kid got too close, I'd completely freak out. But now with people I know, not just randoms, I hate it. If you remember back in the day, I don't know if you still go out clubbing. I don't anymore, too old for that. But if you're in a bar and somebody touches you to like get past you, do you know what I mean?
Mm.
I hate that. Not only because who the fuck are they touching me, but also I'm like, I don't know who you like, why are you touching me? Like that's really personal, you know? But if it's somebody I know and trust, then I love a hug. But
Mm.
I have to know that. Like I don't want to hug like random strangers, you know. It's somebody I know, great. But anyone else, I'm like, oh no, go away, thanks. But
Yeah, it like I will. It's generally people I know. They hug me anyway. I don't have random people hugging me, but
maybe you know, if like get introduced to somebody and some like in a certain social situation, and they're like, oh, this is so and so, and they like go in for like a semi hug kiss thing, and you're like,
oh
oh,
yeah, and
this
I'm
is
like, no,
awkward because I
don't
really
touch
don't know
me.
you. Yeah, but I still haven't braved it to be like, I don't want to hug you, so I just do it, even though it's really awkward.
Or there's been times where
Oh
like when I'm
God.
leaving, if I know
Yeah.
people are all gonna hug me, I'll be like really far away and be like,
Yeah.
"Beep."
So you can just escape, make it really obvious. Oh God. Yeah. Oh goodness me. But
Oh,
yeah, so I mean we've gone off on a major tangent now, right? With the whole hugging, meeting people thing. But maybe that's why I love the sensoriness of gardening so much, because I love like touch and all of those things. So
I think I
yeah.
get that with animals and horses and stuff like that. See, I've no interest, unfortunately, I've no interest in gardening, but I love hearing these things because I'm like I can see how it works for other people. Whether
Yeah.
it's horses, being around animals, like I will hug any animal that comes near me, but if a human tries to hug me, I'm like, go away.
Do you think it's like because with the horse it's like there's that like you know they're not going to say anything back to you, but with a human there's like a certain expectation, isn't there, of like I don't
I
know,
think
it's odd that, isn't it?
I was writing an article about this a while ago, and I think some of the reasons are one, they're very like animals, there's no undertone. You know
No.
full well what they want. Like
Yeah.
my horse will headbutt me if I haven't given him food, and
Yeah.
he's not when he realizes I have no more treats for him, he literally walks away.
Yeah.
And you don't have to worry that it means anything. And then I was always thinking as well, like, as well, ADHD people have like, that look for dopamine. And with
Mm.
horses as well, there's always, even though you get very comfortable around them, there's always that element of danger with them. So it
Mm.
probably
Yeah, true.
keep that dopamine stimulation going because like
Yeah.
even though you get so used to and like all the things we tell people not to do around horses, horse people do, yourself, you use the horse right.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of that thing, like, you're on a half ton animal. Like they could do whatever. Like the reason they're listening to you is not because of talent for you, it's because they've decided they're going to listen to you.
Mm. Yeah. Oh no, that's true actually. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, maybe it's that like on the edge, like, oh, something could happen. Funny. Yeah.
But you don't think about it when you're doing it, but like afterwards, like, if you ever do like if for eventing and stuff like that, like lunatics are doing that. Like, you did
Oh
event,
yeah.
yes, what did you do at the weekend? Well, I went across this long course of fences that are all
Yeah.
solid. So
Yeah. And every time I come up to the fence, I'm thinking, shit, shit, shit. And then you get over and you're like, yay, I'm
yeah,
still alive. Oh dear. Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? I mean, God, yeah, I used to do mounted games, so that was definitely very dopamine heavy, adrenaline fueled. So flinging yourself onto a moving horse, yeah. Quite mad.
more
But
penny
yeah.
drop moments now.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing. You look back and you think, oh God, how did I not realize this? But it just wasn't talked about, was it? It wasn't so out there
Yeah.
as it is
Especially
now.
the
So
time we were growing up, because like I'm 32 going on 33. Like,
mm,
as I said, like there was maybe two, three lads in the whole of primary school that got diagnosed with ADD.
yeah.
They were lunatics, like, and that's over like a full school, like over a course of, there could be a couple of hundred students, and there's like three of them now, like every
Yeah, well, I went to an all girls school, so like there was nobody getting diagnosed with
yeah.
anything. It was like you're just the naughty. I mean, there were naughty girls,
Mm.
um, but there wasn't. Yeah, there wasn't any. There was no boys there to kind of compare it to, and well, sure as shit, they weren't diagnosing any girls with ADHD because girls didn't have ADHD. I'm doing finger quotes here, but
They still don't sometimes. Some people don't think, isn't it?
yeah, it's mad. But I think, there's lots of people out there, isn't there, talking about these things and getting that message out there and hopefully trying to normalize it a bit, or just fucking trying to get a bit of acceptance. Like, I don't understand why people are so unwilling to just accept that, like, there are people that are different out there. Like, it doesn't mean anything bad, or I don't understand why people are so judgmental of it, really. Like, there's so many things in life. Just let people be who they are. Like, stop trying to fit everyone into this boring mold. Like, we don't want to be the same as everybody else. We want to just be allowed to be who we are
Yeah.
and be celebrated for that and not vilified for it. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think the more that we can talk about that and get that message out there, the better, really.
No, absolutely. I think that's 100% true. And like you said, it's not a bad thing. And that's one thing that I feel like I come up against. Like I mention it and people, I'm like, it's not a bad thing. Look, I just mean to need to do things differently and it's
Mm.
fine.
But people are so scared, I think, especially in like traditional workplaces, to like make adjustments for people that need them.
Mm.
And I don't understand what it is. It's like, oh, but if we let you do that, then we're gonna have to. It's like this whole work, flexible working thing. I don't know if you have all that crap in Ireland, but
Oh, there's a lot of that. Yeah.
obviously everyone in the pandemic had to work from home.
Yeah.
People just cracked on. Actually, a lot of businesses did really well in the pandemic because people were just working all the time. And now a lot of them are like, oh, you've got to come back to the office. And people are like, well, I don't want to come back to the office. Like, this really works for me. It means instead of having to commute for an hour each way, I can like go to the gym or spend time with my family or whatever the fuck they want to do with it. And people and like businesses are like, oh, well, if we let you do that, then we're going to have to let other people do that. And it's like, well, so what if you have to let other people do that? Like, there's just no flexibility. It's like they just want to keep us in the dark ages. But I read a report by Mental Health UK, the burnout report they called it. 93% of women have felt very under extreme pressure or stress in the last year. 93%. Like, clearly, our current setup is not working. So,
Mhm.
how about we try and change things and we try and create pockets of time in our day to do things that are good for us, that are good for our brains, that reduce that stress, reduce that pressure? How about we stop demanding that, like, people that are neurodivergent have to fit into neurotypical like ways of working? How about we allow people to just be who the fuck they are, to be called whatever they want, to be, if they want to use the pronouns they them, whatever, like, I can't understand this thing of like everyone needs to be a fucking clone of everybody else. It's tired and it's not working for us, so we've got to make a change. um and people have got to lead that change, and it's a big one. But for us, we've got a general election uh this year, next year, soon, hopefully. And hopefully, I mean, quite honestly, all of our political parties are shit, but I think, I really hope people kind of get up and vote, because it's all well and good, isn't it, to sit and moan like we were saying earlier, but we actually do have the power, more power than we think, to change things. But we've got to use our voices, and that's not something that as women we're really encouraged to do. In fact, we're probably discouraged from doing it. So uh a simple way that people can get involved is, if they don't want to use their voice yet because they're not feeling ready for that, but certainly getting out and voting and making a change there, I think is going to make a start, hopefully. But yeah, anyway, God, I didn't think I'd get political.
No,
I'm
it's interesting,
too
like
political.
you mentioning that, and like not saying that we have shit sorted over here. It's a mess here a lot of the time as well. But
Mm.
I have to say, I've been quite enjoying watching what's going on in the UK. They're just like,
Oh my
oh,
God.
lads, not again. And they just keep digging that hole. I'm just like, how do these people get in charge?
I don't know. Well, it's not that. How do they keep remaining in charge? Like,
Yes,
all of
that's
the
the
stuff
one.
in like the pandemic where they like basically gave loads of contracts to their mates. If you did that in any other company, in like a company, you'd be absolute, well, you'd just lose your job, you'd be out. But
Mhm.
instead, old Bojo got a bloody payoff. And you're
Oh,
just like, how is this even right? And the problem is they're the ones with all the power.
yeah.
And that is the problem. Men, in the vast majority, um, who are either white or, been grown up in a white supremacist society, let's be perfectly honest, whether they're white skinned or not, and they are making choices that suit them and don't suit the whole of society. And so that's why it's so important that I mean, God, I wish we had better people to pick from, but we are where we are. And yeah, I think hopefully people will be mobilized enough. I don't see how they can't be, to be perfectly honest. Like, oh lordy, it's just gone on for too long. So the problem is a lot of more young people are starting to vote now, but I think historically it's been like the older generations that have voted, and they are quite comfortable with that setup because that's what they've grown up with and that's what they know. And all they like to do is moan about how youngsters can't do more than a 40-hour week anymore without getting stressed. And it's like, well, you were stressed too, you just don't fucking remember because you're all retired now, but we're not going to get that luxury. So how about we make some change? It's really interesting how people of an older generation they don't ever look back at their time when they were like in their most stressed part of their lives and think, yeah, I really support the younger generation now for trying to make a change, because actually it was really fucking stressful for us at that time. They go, they slag you off and they go, oh, you can't handle it. Why should we have to handle it? I don't understand that mindset of like, why should, oh, just get on with it. Like, just get on with it. No, we don't like this. We don't want to do this. It's making us unwell. We can make a change. Why can't we make a change? Like,
I've had this like discussion with my dad on certain things, like, and he'll say stuff and I'd be like, but that's not right. And he's like, well, I had to go through it. And I'm like, yeah, well, just because you had to go through it doesn't mean other people should. Like, be better. Like, it's just that simple. Like, you don't make your struggles any less by letting people change how it works. Like, it's.
Yeah, I think it's weird, isn't it? There's that, and actually I had that when I first went into forensics. There was this very like big attitude of like, well, we had to put up with it, so you have to. And I was like, well, why? Did you enjoy that you went through? Did you enjoy that really difficult time? And they're like, no. And I'm like, so why are you going to put other people through that? Like, let's just have a bit of fucking humanity here. And if we can make a change for the better, why wouldn't we try and do that, rather than just basically becoming the bully effectively? Like, oh well, I had to do it, so you have to do it. That's exactly how bullies operate. Invariably people are bullies because they've been bullied themselves, and that is the mindset that we've got stuck into in this society, and it's really fucking damaging. Is it a wonder we're all so like disconnected and lonely and stressed and burnt out? No, because we're not pulling together. We're fucking bitching at each other on the internet. Like, come on, let's not do that anymore and actually affect some real change here.
Just to have a conversation.
Yeah, quite exactly. And get in the garden, of course.
Just don't hug me.
Yeah, don't. Just don't hug me.
I'll talk to you, just don't touch me.
Oh, that's great. Right, I've got to go and eat some lunch. As lovely as it's been chatting.
I just want to ask you one more thing before you go.
Yeah, go. Okay, go.
Okay, so I ask this at the end of every podcast with everyone.
Okay.
What is the best advice you've ever been given?
By another person?
If you can give it to yourself, it's okay. It's whatever best advice you've ever been given.
So I think my best advice I've ever been given, and I gave it to myself after I got my ADHD diagnosis, was don't let them like put out your fire, basically, because for so many years I did let that happen. And I feel like really over time I finally like started to stoke those embers and got it going again. And I think for too many years I let people kind of not trample all over me, but certainly keep me small, keep me scared, if you will. And actually I think one of the most important things as women that we have is we do have this like innate power. Jesus Christ, we like grow and birth human beings. Like, what is more powerful than that, right? If we choose to. Obviously not everybody chooses to, but like we actually have the gift of growing life and inside of us. And it was when I became a mother actually that I was like, I've never felt more powerful when I became a mother, because I was like, I've actually just grown that human inside me and I've pushed it out of my body, and I felt so powerful. And for a while there, I kind of forgot about that power and let myself just kind of sink back into that, like, oh, I just stay in my little bubble and stay safe here and not do anything. So yeah, I think it's like don't let them put your fire out, basically, because that is the one thing that is gonna help you to live a life that you love, but also help you to have a real impact on other people around you. And that impact can be as small as like walking past someone in the street and smiling at them, but don't hug them. um, but you know, like that can change the course of somebody's day. Like if someone's having a really shitty day and they happen to catch your eye and you smile at them. You know, I've had that happen to me when I was in a really bad place and somebody just gave me a kind smile and I was like, oh, wow. And it really just brought me out of my funk, you know? So not everybody in this world is going to like affect great change. That's just not realistic. But never underestimate the power that everybody has within them and let it burn brightly. Like, why the fuck not? Hey?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. That is, yeah, no, it's so true. Now, just before we go as well, where can everybody find you, Kendall?
So I'm trying to get off socials. I am mainly hanging out on Substack now. I don't know if you know much about Substack, but it is a bit of a combo between an email platform and like an old school blogging platform. So I have like a publication on there called The Seed, and people can read my articles, they can subscribe, and they get regular articles to their inbox with kind of like discussions like we've had today, like inspiring things to get them taking more time for themselves and suggestions. And then there's also the opportunity to upgrade to paid as well when you get weekly mindful gardening activities straight into your inbox, so you can just get out and give it a try. So that is mainly where I'm hanging out. So if you go to Substack and you search Kendall Marie Platt, or you can search The Seed, I will pop up there. So yeah.
That's really cool. I have heard about Substack. I've only played with it and just disappeared, but I think it's a really good platform. It's a really good.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. Like I pay for a few different ones on there, which I really enjoy. And I just think it's a bit different. It's just a bit creative. Like you can chat directly with me in there, which is nice. And I'm a very visual person. So I like, you know, I put loads of beautiful photos of like plants and flowers and stuff in there. So it's quite nice to feel like you're kind of curating your own magazine as well. So yeah, it's interesting. People should check it out and have a little play around in there because there's some really cool people on there as well.
That's really, really cool. And as ever, guys, you can still find me on. I have a Substack, but I can't even remember what it is right now. But it's I'm normally found on Instagram and TikTok. On Instagram, it's @strong_in_the_saddle with an underscore, and TikTok I have just @strong_in_the_saddle because I got there first. My website is www.chrissyhawkins.com. So yeah, I just want to say thanks again for joining us today, Kendall.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a lovely chat.
Yeah, it's good. I really do appreciate everybody who listens to this podcast. So if you please could help me with the algorithm and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And even, you know, if you want to reach out and suggest topics for me, I'd be delighted to hear from you. Drop me a DM on Instagram or TikTok. And thanks again for listening.